Call the meeting to order. Can I get approval for the minutes of 5/11/21?
So moved.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's approved. So we'll move on to the boiler discussion.
Great. Well, technically you're supposed to leave it on. Yeah, we're being videotaped and school policy is still what it is. Hopefully 2 more weeks. So Dan, can you give an update?
Yes.
I know we received 3 bids. We have 3 bids that were, the original 3 bids have been updated to reflect the changes that we made in the project.
Yes. So the changes that were made were for new pumps and new expansion tank.
And the type of boiler, right?
Yes, for the HB boilers.
And did you get an itemized bid from Granite State?
So I spoke with Granite State and they said it would take them a couple days. The way they explained it to me is to come in very competitive. They kind of had to rob Peter to pay Paul in certain areas. And because of that, they would have to go back and itemize where they took money from one areas to get us the Grundfos pumps in other areas. And he says it would take them a couple days to itemize it. But the bottom line is their numbers at, just over 300,000.
Well, that's not the bottom line for me because I know we have one pump that failed, right?
Yeah, well, there's one that has failed, yes.
Right, okay, so and the other pumps are fine as far as we know. I
Yes,
don't see a reason to replace, how many, 9 pumps?
I believe there was that many, correct? Yes.
Because one's failed. And also, do you know why it failed? What's wrong with it? Can it be rebuilt or is it? And I'm not saying to rebuild it and reinstall it, I'm saying rebuild it and hold it for a backup.
Well, typically what we do is we rebuild pumps if we can,
Yep.
regardless, and reinstall them, because it's always just cheaper to do it that way.
Yep,
Unless they're so far gone.
that's why I was hoping that they would itemize because with adding those pumps in, it's a lot more expensive than replacing the boilers and that standalone pressure tank.
Right, and like I said, it will take them a day or 2 to get it together,
Okay.
to get numbers together for
All
them.
right.
It was something they just couldn't
Yeah,
turn around within a couple of hours. Yeah, so
okay.
that's kind of where we're
Yeah, I
at.
mean, you've done a lot of work on this.
So, yeah, so we have the 3 bids that came in. 2 of them were fairly competitive,
Yep.
and one of them was quite a bit more than the rest.
So what's the difference on P&S between the 310,412 and the 283,053?
So the way they built them out was with different grades of pumps. Okay, let me get to that, I'm sorry. So for instance, if you go with the alternative 2, those are the TACO variable speed pumps. That's kind of their top of the line pump. And then it goes all the way down to alternative 4, which are not ECM pumps. They're not variable speed. They do have a low speed and a high speed. So the rate of return on those wouldn't be as great because we can't control the speed in it with a variable speed. Because with variable speeds, we can shut down at times to a very low speed and it's more constant.
Does that have to be done manually or is it done by a computer?
Oh, no, it's all done electronically.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all done electronically. So, so that alternative 4 bid was just going with a basic generic pump, TACO pump, that just has a high and low speed. So in the sense, it is an ECM pump because it has the 2 speeds, but it's not a variable speed pump.
Mhm.
So they price it out with those 3 different alternatives depending on which type of pump we want to go with. The alternative 2 is a close competitor to the Grunsfeld pumps. They're good pumps. I'm not going to say that they're not. They're good pumps. But if we were going to make that option of going with new pumps, I would suggest that we would stick with Granite State's bid because we are getting the Cadillac of the pumps.
Which is
for-
where the
for
more
cheap.
efficient come, that's what you explained that.
Right.
The Granite State bid had the pumps that give the return on investment, whereas the other one was just it's open or closed type pump.
What we have currently now.
That we have
So-
currently, so that doesn't make any sense to do that.
Yeah, so the
Depends on what
alternative
the
number
investment
two, there's a rate of return on the investment there also, since they are variable speed. So Taco Pumps manufactures like 6 or 7 different types of pumps for other companies. Grunsfeld does the same thing. Grunsfeld, like I said, is the better pump. It's like they're the industry leader in pumps. So my suggestion is if it's a matter of just a couple $1,000s to move with Granite State for the better pump system, the Grunsfeld pumps rather than the Taco pumps. And like I said, they're good pumps. It's just, you know, if you're gonna pick the Mercedes or the Chevy, you know, or do you want to go with it for the same price? So,
And we don't, and the difference is 310 versus 298?
well, no, it would be 310. Well, if we were compared to Granite State,
Right.
it's 310 compared to 300. So it's
Okay,
$10,000
so
difference.
10,000 more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what, just, so we've got people that are gonna be watching this. What are the 3 bids? What are the 3 prices?
Thank you, Jamie.
And what do they, what kind of pumps are they using?
Right, so Granite State came in at $300,488. And that's with the HB Smith boilers, the expansion tank, and the Grunsfeld pumps. Then we have Palmer and Sicard that came in. With the boilers alone was $175,000. You add in the expansion tank for another $13,000, which puts you at $188,000. And then you could pick alternative 2, 3, or 4 for the additional $121,000, $103,000, or $94,000. And that's how they broke out.
So what would the equivalent be to the Granite State?
The equivalent to that would be the alternative 2 with the Taco SKS pumps, which would bring us to about $310,000. Then we had Townsend, who came in with their bids with the same basically boilers and burner units, and using the Taco pumps, similar to what Palmer and Sicard would use, and they came in at $449,845. So their pumps and tanks were about $179,000, and their boilers were $269,000. That's where they're hitting us there, is in the boilers, over $100,000 difference.
Trying to find the email that you sent that had the 2 proposals in it. And
I can get
The original ones, or?
Yeah, no, not the original ones. The ones that you sent, was it last night or this morning, or
I sent 1 this afternoon and 2 yesterday.
2? Yeah, the 2 yesterday.
Yeah, those were the Granite State and
So
the
that would
Palmer
have
and
been
Sicard.
6/1, June 1st. And for some reason,
I got a Palmer's card in front of me. So,
here it is.
yeah, can you find it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's from
Did you find it, Jim?
Townsend. But
Yeah,
this
that was
should
the
be-
one I sent today.
Right, so this would be before that.
And prior to that, there's one with Granite State.
And it was sent by you, Dan,
Sicard,
right?
Palmer's
Correct.
card.
And they were both together, Palmer and Sicard and
I'll
Granite State were all in one.
Okay,
Yeah, same email.
okay.
Do you need it?
Oh, it's in the same email?
It's in the same
It's in
email,
the same
yes.
email.
Oh, okay, because I was
Just two
looking down
attachments.
and I
I
couldn't,
just sent it to you, Jim.
okay. I see an attachment here. Oh, come on.
So all 3 of them consist of 2 boilers,
Correct.
9 pumps,
Yeah, that was they all spec'd out the same, and I got the exact numbers here, I gotta count them up.
And the overflow tank.
Yeah, an expansion tank.
Thank you. Jamie, I have one more piece of information when you're ready. I just don't want to hog the.
And the
within there,
expansion tank is the floor mounted tank that's gonna replace the two that are up above.
the 4 that are above.
The four that are above.
Right.
Without taking them down or out, they
Yep.
just stay there.
Yep.
Thank you. That was one thing I wanted to mention. Are you ready for the next one?
Yep.
I asked Dan to call each company and ask them the following question. If we place an order ASAP, AKA at the board meeting tonight, we decide, and he calls them in the morning, could they guarantee that it would be installed by September 15th so that we could get rid of the temporary boiler and save that cost for the summer? And with the knowledge that if they don't meet September 15th, that they would pay the amount for the replacement boiler until it's done, right? Thinking that September 15th is kind of like that window where it starts to get cold and we may need the boiler. And Dan, what did each company say about that?
They, as it sits now, they don't think it would be an issue to complete it by September 15th. Now, everything can change within a week here due to
Yeah,
supply line
so
issues.
So, again, provided that we placed an order right away.
Yeah, it's hard to pin them down. I know Palmer and Sicard said that to get the cast iron would be 10 to 12 weeks
Mhm.
and about 5 to 6 weeks for the burners.
Mhm.
And then when I talked to Granite State, they agreed that 5 to 6 weeks for the burners, but they feel they're checking on it now. They feel that they have those in stock, the cast iron. So
Oh, they have them in stock
it'd
now.
be a matter of a couple weeks getting those, and they're checking that right now, because I kind of confronted them on that, and I says, are you in line with everybody else as far as contractors goes, how you're getting, because they're all the same boilers. It's
Right,
just,
yeah.
You know,
The supply chain is the supply chain.
exactly, and they felt like they had that stuff in stock to get rolling on it, so I'm waiting to get a text from him at any moment now as far as how long it would take for Granite State to get the cast for that.
Okay.
But the three of them, when I talked to all three of them, they felt pretty confident with the things as they are now, that they could definitely complete this more like around September 1st.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So,
But they couldn't guarantee us and then pay the difference if they have to do that.
no, I mean, there is no
It's too-
guarantees
there's no
with everything going on.
Well, I tried. I just wanted Jamie to hear that I tried.
And now they're saying there's possibly gonna be another surge in COVID come this fall again, and, you know, so.
I've spending too much time with Jamie and Jim, so I know which questions to ask. I thought Jamie would be impressed by this. But Jamie, do you want,
Well, I'm trying to see, so I'm looking through the Granite State now, and to Jim's point, I'm not seeing a price for the pumps.
no, they gave us a price for everything in the
Everything,
package.
right.
Right. Jim asked Dan today to try to get a breakout the way the other ones did it.
Yeah.
And they said that they couldn't do it that fast because they kind of, as you said at the beginning of the meeting, they kind of robbed Peter to pay Paul in some areas. So they've got to figure out what that would look like if they gave it to us in chunks. They just gave us, if you do the whole thing, this is what it is. And I think that's part of the question is, the first question that I have is, you know, in light of the bids coming in the way they did, which certainly it's far better than what I thought it was going to be based on our previous meeting for two of them, are we talking about considering doing the pumps? I know that year-end fund balance is a part of this, and I did speak with Matt, and he's estimating that even if we withhold 2.5% for a contingency, we would still have roughly $2 million at the end of the year. So in terms of the funds, Matt did want me to let you know that he wasn't feeling well today, couldn't talk to us, but he wanted me to tell you that he felt like from a pricing perspective or for covering it, he's not concerned about funding it, right? But the question is are we gonna do the boilers in the tank, or are we gonna do the boilers in the tank in the pumps?
Well, and we could always defer back to Granite State's original bid of $158,725 for just the two boilers.
Oh, thanks, I forgot that we had that.
So
Oh, what is it for 100 and?
$158,725.
And that was just for the two
That's
boilers.
just for the two boilers, okay? Now, I don't foresee it being more than probably $30,000 for an expansion tank, and that's on the heavy side.
Well,
If
these
we
guys
wanted-
are talking 13,000 for P&S.
Right. So, and like I said, I'm just forecasting to cover Granite. I don't want to commit to what Granite State's gonna bid on it. I would have to get a separate price for that. So we can always defer back to that. Now, when I asked him, I says, well, is it as simple as taking the price of the boilers out of the equation in the second bid and saying that's what we're paying for the pumps? And he goes, no, it really doesn't work that way, because what we're doing is, he says, we're fudging the numbers in the boiler system to make up for lost ground in the pump system with the Grundfos pumps. And it's, I know it sounds confusing, but I get what he's saying. You know, they are paying, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul in some areas when it comes to some of the electrical contractors, the brick contractors, the concrete contractor that comes in. So they're trying to nip every penny they can to get a final number to us that looks appealing to us.
So current system has how many pumps?
Okay, we have 2, 6, I believe there's 8 pumps right now.
And those are standard pumps, not variable, right?
They're just on-off pumps. Either run or they don't run. Single speed.
So then I look at Palmer and Secord, and they are quoting 6 pumps. So Jim, you mentioned 9 pumps. We have 8. Palmer and Secord is 6.
Thank you.
What? We have 1 pump that we've confirmed is dead.
Or is down right now.
Is down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So how do we get from 7 that aren't down to replacing 6? Has there been some assessment done on different pumps?
So we have
How do
the
get
2
that?
main pumps that come into the building there too. So we have the 2 main pumps that come in and feed the whole system. And then we have I believe it's 6 individual pumps that pump the water from the boiler through the school.
okay, so I just want to make sure that Amy is asking an important question.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I'm answering it.
I know it's hard, and we almost should have had this meeting over there so we could go look if we needed to, but.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think, there's 6 pumps up high and 2 low
And the 2 low ones,
are the main pumps that come in that feed the system. And then the 6 are the pumps that feed the
Zones,
system.
the
into
so
the
one,
school.
so
There's
one
zones.
company just, they did
There's 4
6.
zones, there's 4
Right.
zones in the school.
Right.
So 2, 4, 6, see, that's what I'm trying to think. I kind of wish I was there and I could see it.
Can you look at your picture?
Yeah, I don't know if I have them.
How many pumps were in each bid?
Well, if we go back.
I mean, really, that's
These
the
are-
bottom line.
The Taco bid has 6, like Jamie said.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
it's the
the
2, 4,
PNS
6 that pump the water into the school.
Right, well, it would make sense that the return, because my question is, if there's 6 in the building and the primary reason, the only reason why I'm even entertaining or asking about replacing the pumps is because of the return on investment for the variable speed pumps. That's because they're
Where is
working, right? So,
We're told verbally there's a return on
Right.
investment, but there's been no numbers.
right,
Mhm.
and that's what I'm asking about now, is, because I think, so just to slow us down just a hair. I think that are we in agreement that we need to replace the 2 boilers in the overflow tank and we need to pick one of these people to do that? We're there,
I
right?
think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. So what we really need to do is,
And the overflow.
the overflow tank, the
Expansion tank.
expansion tank, the actual furnaces and the burners.
Yeah, the discussion at this point is what's the benefit of replacing pumps that are currently working?
And that's what I want to know too, right? Because I don't know the answer to that myself at this point, and
If you look at PNS's bid, between 94,500 and 122,000,
yes.
which is a substantial investment to replace something that's already working.
Right. And that's a really good question, Dan. And the other question is we've talked about that, is it cheaper to replace the pumps while the system's taken apart? And Jim and I talked today, because we had, he had some questions, I had some questions, and it's all good, but just to be transparent about this, we were wondering if each pump has a shutoff valve and they need to be replaced occasionally and fixed.
Dan answered that they did.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, well,
They
yeah,
do. So
that's standard in.
I just don't want the community to perceive that we're capitalizing on an emergency to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed.
Right.
The emergency is the boilers.
Correct. And
That's the only emergency.
And there's unanimity and that has to be done.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you another question. What do we normally stock? What do we have for pumps on shelf to support. So we have 0 spare parts on pumps.
Nothing.
And we have one, that is the pump, is the down pump, the feeding system pump or the internal? One of the 6
So
or one of the
it
2?
goes to his own,
So one of the 6
yes.
is one of the failed.
And it's not winter, so it's not critical
It's not
right at the
winter.
moment.
Right, so it goes back to Jim's question. Is the pump that's being taken out, is that repairable as a spare or is that just trash when you take
Well,
it
until
out?
we take it down, we don't know,
So you don't
because we
know.
don't know if the bearings are blown in it, we don't know if it's just a seal, we don't know exactly what's wrong with that pump.
So you gotta replace a pump, is I'm hearing. One pump is.
Well, yeah,
Potentially,
absolutely,
yes.
Yeah,
And Jim, I don't know your thoughts. In my mind, it is prudent to have a pump on the shelf.
Yeah,
If you've got a 6-pump system and
Well,
they're about the same
You said
age,
the
it's
same
prudent.
at the high school, same pumps at the high school. too,
but,
right?
but that's why we have 100% redundancy, because if the pump goes down, we shut it, that pump down, and
the other
second
one
pump
picks up.
works for it. So that eliminates the reason of having a pump on the shelf, because we have redundancy in the
Oh, so
system.
these aren't isolated to specific zones then?
Oh my
Yes.
goodness, I just had an idea.
There's 2 pumps
You
per
did.
zone, and
Okay.
you can shut down one pump while the other one works that
Oh,
zone,
okay.
while this one's being fixed, and then
Oh.
once that one's up, they both run together.
So even on the
simultaneously.
pump that's broken, the zone still works?
The zone still
Exactly.
works because
Just
there's
taxes the other
100%
pump
redundancy.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So is it an emergency? Absolutely not. We can, in theory, run on one pump. And there's a lot of schools that actually do that. They don't have 100%.
Yeah, but I don't wanna have the heat break down at
But-
5 in the morning on the day of school in the middle of February and not have redundancy. That's not a good idea
Well,
either.
based on the P&S bid, dividing 6 into the alternate 2, that's $20,000 a pump.
Now, and let me back up on one thing here. When we go back to the original Granite State bid for $158,000 just for the boilers, that's just for the boilers. And when
It
we
doesn't
said,
include the burners, right?
well, it does include the burners, but one of the things we upgraded though was the water recirculating unit where it takes water from the hot water, domestic hot water heater, runs it through the system, warms it up, and then puts it back in the domestic system.
Yeah.
So that would need to be replaced instead of reused. So a lot of the things that we did in here in the second bid was replacing some of the things that need to be replaced because all 3 contractors were like, okay, well, we can replace these boilers, but we still are dealing with old antiquated equipment that's assisting the boilers. So it would be best to put a new 3-way valve in. It'd be best to put in a new reheater system, and some other, of the
So those
other
things are
options.
included in the bids.
So
So
there's
those
an
are all included
existing,
in the bids.
there's an existing reheater system?
There is, but it's 30+ years old. And
Okay.
my guess is that it's gonna go soon.
So just for clarification, because you said that's for the boiler only. We're not just talking materials, right? When you say for the boiler only, it's an installed labor included cost.
Labor and material.
Okay.
Yeah, we asked that before, that's why I'm glad you brought it up, though. It's good for the video and
Labor and
transparency.
material.
Um,
So even though we have those original bids from the company, if we just go with the boilers with those few added upgrades, such as the reheater, the 3-way valve, the option of putting the expansion tank, and obviously that number's gonna come up a little bit
Yeah.
more, which will, I mean, it's hard for me to guess, but we're probably touching the $200,000 mark at that point.
Yeah, to do the things, the 3 things that we really feel like we need to do and do them well.
Right.
So the Granite State proposal with 158,007 for the boilers.
That's just boilers
Just-
installed and
It doesn't include the reheating system.
or 3-way valves or those other
Okay.
things that we really should seriously consider replacing if we're gonna do the boilers.
Because P&S is 175,000 for the
Mhm.
boilers, 5. Does that include the reheating system and the,
It does.
okay,
So they're on the upper end, they're more expensive than Granite State at this.
but they
Well,
include more. They're including this other portion.
Granite State is including more than, no, it's all spec'd out the same according to the blueprints. Okay, according to what Turner has given us. So they're all including that 3-way valve, the reheater, and
In their updated proposal, it's not itemized.
it's all
Exactly.
in
The problem
there.
is that Granite State didn't itemize, and we're trying to compare apples to oranges
Right,
to
and
get
I
to
think we
somewhere.
really need that. So in my mind anyways, you got the basic boiler and you got the expansion the tank. So you put those on the shelf, and now we're talking pumps. You got at least one pump. So you put that on the shelf. So all of that's a given.
So we're
Right.
at
You got-
220 or
you got-
230.
Yeah, you're in that range.
Yeah.
You're well under $250,000, but you're approaching, if not higher than 200.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that.
Yeah.
And so now you're looking at the remaining 7, and if a pump is X, then a variable speed pump is Y. And then the question becomes, what is that delta? Because, I'm in the lighting industry, and, we see our friends in all these buildings in the HVAC system on a regular basis, and all of us spend our time trying to upsell and trying to get the higher margin product. And we tell people all day long, you put this lighting system in, and you put these nodes in, and you got IoT of the world, and you can do all these things, and you got the infrastructure ready. And nothing works when you put it in, but it's ready if you want to invest in that at some point in time in the future.
Yeah.
Variable speed pumps do the same thing. If you do not have the digital infrastructure to manage those variable speed pumps, you just don't get the benefit from them.
That's a
So,
great point.
it's a great bell and whistle, but there's usually, in my experience, a lot of other expenditures. So we'll go out and we'll sell a control system. So you don't just have a wall dimmer that goes like this. Your control system is going to sense the light. It's going to sense the cloud cover. It's going to
Works on your
adjust your
phone.
lighting and all this crap. So people put all that in, and 95% of the time, all they really need is on and off.
Yeah.
But they got the abilities to do all this for the other 5% of the time. They pay a fortune for it. And when you look at that, just that delta, X minus Y, that's how much money I'm paying today. What am I saving on an annual basis by having that? That's how we get our return. I want to know that before I pay the upcharge.
And
Sometimes it's worthwhile if you get the infrastructure and the ability to use it. Sometimes it's just, we buy things to make ourselves think that we've done the right thing, but it's not of practical usage.
And so what is the answer to that question, Dan, if you know? What is the return on, is Jamie correct that in order to utilize, if you say, do we need the thermostats to utilize the variable speed pumps?
No.
Okay, so
We
they
can
work,
still go with the pneumatic system with the existing pumps. So that they will work hand in hand.
so it controls the,
It just controls it pneumatically rather than.
again, as Steve Riley told us, moving to a digital system, if we have variable speed pumps, would work in tandem, but I don't know what the cost savings is if we went with the variable speed pumps. That's the bottom line.
And so to me,
What's the delta?
yeah, so
They're
what's the
saying about
delta?
60% energy savings is what Grundfos is advertising.
So
That's
advertising.
if we replace all the pumps.
Yeah, well, absolutely, yeah.
Right.
So there's a difference between advertising and guaranteeing. So are they going to guarantee us that there's going to be a 60% energy reduction in the consumption of that being X today, and tomorrow is going to be 1 minus 60% X?
Right, and that goes back to doing like I don't know if you've ever done this, but we did a huge energy project in Turner
Yep.
with Siemens. And they came and analyzed everything. I'm sure you've done this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, we guarantee
Right.
that you will save this much and you'll pay us out of a portion of that.
And
If
normally,
you don't save it, we pay the difference.
what you get when they push it back at the guarantee, you find out, well, that's the number that we use. We made the following assumptions. And when you look at the list of assumptions they've made,
Yeah, your lights turn off and
it's
on.
textbook assumptions that can be proved in the lab.
Yeah.
But it doesn't match installed reality.
Right,
And that becomes the issue. So if we get a redundant system, in my mind, anyways, my mind that the cap would be, you got a boiler, you got an expansion tank, you got a pump. I don't even mind a second pump on the shelf because you have to do something else. After that, with a redundant system and a spare pump, you can deal with anything that comes in those other 6 pumps when they come. You got one on the shelf, you can switch it off, you can go redundant. And if they're isolated and redundant, you can isolate and remove that outlying pump, if you will. So to me, out of the 8 or the 6 pump replacements that we're talking there, I think there's 4 too many, and that's what your average was at 20, so it's somewhere $80,000, $90,000 high than where I think we need to be to have very reasonable confidence that we're covered from a facilities perspective.
Well,
Jim,
the
what are your
average,
thoughts?
the average increase, if you go with alternative 3 for pumps, is 103,000 for 6. So we don't know what just one pump would cost.
Yeah, you have to
They're
figure that out too,
about
because there's gonna be a discount for
Yeah.
quantity.
and we don't,
Right.
and we don't
And there may
know,
be Energy Star rating discounts we can get through the government.
Yeah, that's possible too.
and alternate two pump is roughly 122,000. 3 is 103,000, and 4 is 94.5 thousand. This is the P&S proposal.
Mhm.
So what benefit do you have between the 4 and the 2? And you're saying that's where you get the 50% fuel savings?
Up to 60%
Up to
in
60?
energy savings, yeah.
Okay.
Now,
So,
that's with Grundfos. Now,
yeah,
obviously, they spec out Taco pumps, which are still very good pumps, and I'm sure they're comparable to the Grundfos. So I'm sure the savings is probably in the same ballpark,
mhm.
okay? So if we look at the Palmer and Sicard, the difference between 94,000 and 121, well, I wouldn't even credit, I wouldn't even look at the $94,000 one, the alternative 4,
Yeah.
because if we're gonna do it, then why would you just put the same old pumps in that are basically existing there now? If we're gonna replace pumps, I would go with variable speed.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is as they break, why don't we replace them with variable speed instead of just replacing all of them?
Because the
Variable
kicker is
speeds are also
variable
designed to
speed.
fail more often, right?
Well, they
So
don't.
you're talking about a
fall off.
30-year proven life design versus a variable speed design, which will fail more often because it's got electronics in it.
Well, yes and no. You have to prep the system for variable speed pumps, and that's all included in these bids. So what they do is they actually flush the system 3 to 4 times to get all the metallics out of the whole system. And then what they do is they put a pre-filter before the water even hits those pumps. It's basically like your filter in a swimming pool. What it does is there's a magnetic charge in there, and it grabs all those metallic finite items out of there before they go into the pump, which ruins the pump. So there is conditioning of the water before it actually gets to the pump. So you just can't throw a variable speed pump in place of a regular pump. You have to have a lot of these
There's a treatment
clarifying-
process,
Yeah,
so,
the
so we can't do one at a time, is what you're saying.
Right.
Is that per zone, or is it for
Right.
the, or
It's
is it
for the
one,
whole-
one system for the entire
It's
system?
one system for the entire system.
Okay.
These are great questions, I didn't know this.
Different manufacturers, the screening system's a different manufacturer than the variable speed pump company. So when there is a failure, the variable speed pump company says, it's because your screening system failed, it's
Well,
not.
and see, Grundfos makes the
That's why
screening
you
system
recommend
for,
that,
yeah.
yeah.
Because they use it as a complete total system, so it's all under warranty, and we don't have that finger pointing.
My God, I know way too much about this now.
So,
Yeah,
Dan,
we
we
have-
know Granite State because they currently work with us, right?
Right, yeah, they do.
What do you know about Palmer and Seacard?
They're a big contractor, they do great work in the area. I
Okay.
mean, I can't badmouth them either, they're a fine company. They do some universities and schools also. We just haven't used them recently. I think they did some work for us about a decade ago
Okay.
in something, but I don't know them on a personal level.
And the other company is way higher priced.
Townsend is another good company. They came in high. This is kind of my gut. They did a fine job as far as speccing it out and building it, but I think this project is a little bit large for their wheelhouse. They do a lot of light commercial and residential stuff. And they came in to kind of look at this. We're using a company called Night Oil out of Massachusetts. And I called some of these oil companies and said, hey, who do you recommend that does your work? And Townsend came up a couple times from these oil companies, said, hey, give Townsend a call because they do quite a bit of work. Hence the reason why I called Townsend, and they were interested in it. So I kind of did my homework before I called the suppliers, I called oil companies and said, hey, who are the big players here in town who can do this? And they came up a couple times and they were interested in bidding, so that's why I let them have a whack at it. So, like I said, they do big systems, but I got a feeling that this may be just a touch out of their wheelhouse. Or with Palmer Sicard, Granite States, there's a couple other big ones, they're capable of doing things like this.
Well, if we had the breakdown with Granite State, personally, I would be able to make a recommendation.
So here's a suggestion for a potential motion.
Yeah,
I I would say that we go forward with with an approval, a facilities meeting recommendation to the board for boilers, for expansion tank, and for, and talk, at one pump at least. And then what I want to see is, we want to get the expansion or the breakout of this. And we'd ask the board to give the facilities committee the authority for an emergency meeting as soon as the following data sets are available, to then make the call and trigger it as to whether we do variable versus regular. Because if it's a redundant system, the pump isn't going to be your lead time critical thing to September. It's going to be the cast and the boilers.
So I just got a text here from Granite State, and they can get the cast in under 2 weeks.
So that's even quicker.
Yeah, because Palmer and Sakar was saying 10 to 12 weeks on the cast.
So let's get from them the breakout, and if we have the data set for tomorrow, Jim, let's just call an
Let's just
audible.
do it.
And have a meeting, you know, whatever the proper notification to the public is.
Yeah.
And even if we do it on a Zoom, just to be able to get the final okay. And
The other thing you could do is you could have the board authorize just an idea is you could, almost the same thing, except you have the board authorize the superintendent to work with the chair of the finance committee the facilities committee to make a decision up to X amount of money.
Yep.
And then Jim and I just chit chat on the phone and call it. Then you don't have to have another meeting and because I don't think that you or Pete, like, we all agree and Jim's okay with it. I mean, we beat this. We really
it's
have.
almost as cheap as I am. So.
Yeah, I know. But I think that the real question for me is, I do want the board to decide, so it's public and clear.
Yeah, I agree.
As to whether or not we're doing the pumps. Because if we're doing the pumps, then it's easy. It's $300,000. We call them in a couple of hours and say, you can get us the boilers in 2 weeks. You gave us the low bid, we're taking it. You know what? The 2 week thing is big, right? Because that means we're not waiting for the supply chain pieces, because we all know that 2 weeks is really not 2 weeks, even, do you know what I mean? Like, things just happen, especially
I'm
when
surprised
COVID.
they have casts in 2 weeks. That
That is a very
They just
compelling
have them on
thing.
the shelf, is basically.
Yeah, they have them on the shelf apparently. So I'm just saying, like, I'm really not, I don't have a recommendation for you as a superintendent. I'm not a facilities guy, Jeannie. I can't say to you, yeah, do the pumps. I love the idea of getting a 60% return on energy, but I don't like that it's not promised. And I feel the same way all of you do about this, right? But I also don't think that considering how prudent we've been with money this year, and we have been very careful for 2 years running. If there's a time to pay and replace it and just get it done, now's the time. And I can tell you as superintendent, that building's gonna stay online for a really long time.
So I agree that this is an opportune time, but I don't agree that this is a time to just turn my head and say, well, I'll just spend that without getting the answers.
No, I agree with that too. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because you don't know what's gonna come up in the future that you're gonna want money for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
One other
these gentlemen
question.
are willing to come in. I mean, if we can narrow it down to the 2 contractors.
Well, I think we throw out Townsend. They're
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
there.
Yeah, all we need is the information on,
If Granite State can give us a quick breakdown, I think that we can pull a trigger
Right.
one way or the other. But I would like to understand, so we're gonna be paying for variables.
And
I'd
honestly,
like to understand what that delta is.
I would too.
I'm not a boiler guy, and that's why I'm putting it out there, is Granite State and Palmer Sakar, I'm sure would be more than happy to discuss with us offline somewhere that, hey, this is why we need to do this, or this is, we don't need to do this, or we should do this. You know, it might be a direction we may want to go fairly quickly.
To me, the concern would be, you get into that and you end up in dog and ponies, and ultimately.
Right. I
Yeah,
don't,
no, yeah,
Ultimately, we
Yeah,
gotta
this
get a
one.
decision, and we already know what part of the decision is. If Granite State can just give us the breakdown, then,
All right.
and if we can get the delta of variable. Now, if they say, I guarantee you, this is your monitoring of what your boilers cost today. Tomorrow, once you install this, it's gonna be that times 1 minus 60%. This will be your new rate, and you save 60%, then I'll sign.
and we'll cover the difference.
Right.
well, we also need.
My
to know
guess
how
is
much-
that's simply not true.
You know, we
Well,
also
do
need
something
to
like that,
have,
so
I
you
don't
don't
know
want-
how much the fuel bill is for that, running those. boilers.
Right.
Right, and in order to do something like that, I'm sure they're gonna wanna bring in an energy expert to do an audit and everything.
Sure.
You know,
I would expect, but which means a statement that it'll save you 60% is not based on anything other than when we do an experiment in our lab, we can demonstrate
and that's
this.
that's what Grundfos is claiming, is that we could save up to 60% in our energy costs, you know? Now, realistically, could we get 40%? That's probably more realistic, and that's one of the things we have to discuss and consider is, even at a 40% cost of savings, is it worth
Well,
doing?
I have one more idea and then we'll call it, because I think we're good. I think that you could have the board tonight authorize us to move forward with purchasing the 2 boilers and the auxiliary pieces for that, including the overflow tank, is that what it's called? Expansion tank. And that the superintendent and the chair of the facilities committee can choose which company, provided that the breakdown from the second company is comparable to the breakdown that we have now, right? So in other words, we can't play a game and choose them if they're way off, right?
Correct.
And then we can move on that, and then we can just keep discussing these, because we've got another meeting in 2 weeks. We can get all kinds of information about pumps and decide that in 2 weeks. The boiler's the part that's important.
Well, the boiler, I think we need to move on the boiler this week.
Today.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't even want to have another facilities committee meeting. I just want to get that breakdown tomorrow morning and call them up and be like, because I'll call them up and be like, hey, look, I need this right now. We already know it's 158 and change plus some.
Well, it's 158 without the preheating system.
Like I said, plus some.
Yeah, right.
158 and change plus some.
Right.
I'd say about 200,000, you know.
I'm pretty sure it's 158. You told me for this and the expansion tank.
Yeah. I know. I get you. I get you.
Actually, yeah, it was replacing,
Next time I buy a car, I'm bringing you with
that
me.
158 was including replacing 4 expansion tanks.
Yeah, yeah. And removing them.
And removing them, so actually 158 should be less.
Sounds great. So Jamie, do you want to make that convoluted motion? Do you feel like?
I have no problem making the motion that we move forward with the boiler and the expansion tank, and that we get the breakdown from Granite State. And I have no problem with you two making that decision once you have it in your hands, and then we'll go.
And I'm gonna get the breakdown.
And then we'll
from Palmer's and Carr's
resolve
also.
with a plan to resolve the pumps by next week, and we know what we want to see
Yep.
next meeting.
Yep.
And we know what we want to see in the pumps. We want to see what is the delta between variable and regular.
Yep.
And if they're saying it's this much in savings, so are you prepared to guarantee that?
Yeah, right.
So when you say boilers and burners.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant, yeah.
So I've got one more question though, Dan, you said that the overtime was between 135 and 175? Is that depending on company or?
Yeah, it's depending on company, and just for clarification, is that during the install for this? Or
Is that what?
Is this overtime during the install of all this, or is this overtime if we need them once the install's done on a maintenance contract?
Eat both.
Okay, so maintenance contract, typically they drop the rates quite a bit. When we sign into a maintenance, for instance, like right now we have E&E, we're charged $90 an hour.
Yep.
Straight time, there is, I think it's $110 overtime.
And there's standard things that they do in that maintenance.
Oh, yeah. And depending on what type of contract we want to get, because we can have them come in here quarterly, we can have them come in here semi-annually.
So we have a separate company doing the maintenance from the people that put the boilers.
Well, we can do it that way, but I would strongly suggest the company that puts it in would also have the
Well,
maintenance.
that's why I want to know what their fees are.
Well,
Because to
that's-
compare,
That's hard for me to say based on, do we want them to come in monthly?
Yeah, and do we want them for all 4 buildings or just this building? Like,
well,
what's
I mean,
the?
what's the standard? There's got to be a standard.
The standard is typically quarterly,
Okay,
okay, typically. But there's also things in there, there's added things. Do we want them changing filters, or are we gonna change filters? There's little things like that.
well, just to compare though, what's your standard quarterly maintenance? What does it include and what's the charge? And ask both companies that.
Okay.
And then what's your overtime rate?
Yeah, and that's something that, depending on what program we go with, will reflect the rate, because if we go on a monthly rate, then usually their labor rates drop. Right. If we go on a
What's your
semi-annual, the
quarterly?
labor rates
I'm
go
saying
up.
quarterly rate if you have to come in
Yeah.
and work on something and you
Yep.
have overtime on that.
OT and straight time.
Right.
So, and I can figure that out and what it includes.
Right.
Jamie's actually drawing it out for us. I love it.
So.
Here's the challenge you have when you're changing from a standard technology to a better technology.
Theoretically better.
Theoretically better. So you have right now, so we have one pump now. So that pump is dead and can't be replaced, right? That's one of
Maybe
six.
it could be rebuilt, we don't
Right.
know.
But one of six, there's 5 more. If the decision is to get 5 variable speeds, your cash out in today's money is $100,000.
Yep.
Your savings, whatever today's current energy is, I have no idea what it is to run the boiler, but whatever that
It's
is.
10 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah, but how many kilowatt hours do you use?
I can tell you, I have the bill right
Because I
here.
mean, that's gonna be your calculation. I'm spending 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And this is gonna be point, 04 per kilowatt hour.
Yep.
Times whatever, so that's 0.6 kilowatt hours. Or 0.06 kilowatt hours, and then how much is the kilowatt hours? That's your savings. And it takes an awful lot of savings to overcome that cash outlay to get
That's
your
right.
return on investment.
And that's why you're looking at the ROI of 3 years
Correct.
or 4 years.
So it's not just, this is a savings, yeah, it's a savings, but I paid this for the savings.
Up front,
What you're
Right.
talking about is the difference between lease, it's the same thing as leasing and owning a car. Like
yeah,
it's is it worth the maintenance later to own it? Like what is the actual cost, like having a new car every 3
So
years?
when we look at investments, that's precisely what we do. We say,
Yep.
how much cash does it cost me today?
Yep.
In order to buy those savings that I'm gonna get in the future.
I'm just having fun with you, but I'm gonna throw one more in there.
Yep.
What would it cost if the price, the value of the dollar as these amounts increase over time too? Because no matter what, pumps will fail in the future.
Yep.
Right? And is it, if we pay for them all now, do we save money in their future cost? And what's the lifespan of the pumps?
well, I
You see where I'm
would
going with this?
add one more thing into that.
Yeah,
So.
I'm just trying to think like you two,
Yeah,
right? You guys
if you're
think like this.
replacing pumps, if you're replacing pumps that are working well for $100,000, the wear and tear on those pumps, if they're got another 5 years to go, you're installing something that's gonna depreciate 5 years sooner than what you need. So that's, I mean, if you wanna get down into the weeds about it, you know?
Mhm.
So what you end up doing is you take that into account, you take your projected interest rate on the investment. And if you're at today at 2%, then all these future cash flows are only being discounted back at 2%.
Mhm.
So if you got higher inflation that you need to then therefore take that into account, it's gonna say these future cash flows are worth less.
Right,
The question becomes, what's your opportunity cost of that 100,000?
yes, I didn't have the
Where
term
else
for
would you
that.
spend it?
Right, because if it costs 140 grand in 2 years to do them all, or 3 years, then you've just wasted another $40,000.
But part of that, so opportunity cost differentials. It might be option one. It might be, I'm gonna buy some books. There's value in that, I buy them today.
Yeah.
It might be, I'm gonna give it back to a taxpayer and they're gonna be able to pay off their defaults or their pay off their further down their house. And now they've got it in land, which land is a very good hedge against inflation.
Yep.
So it becomes, is there a better use for that?
Yep.
And then there's a whole other set of options for the use of that.
Absolutely. Yep.
So in my mind, when I'm talking ROI, this is what I'm looking at. Does it pass my initial hurdle or not?
Yep.
And then if it does, is there something else that gives me more?
Yep.
Because what we're saying is, I don't really need it for the system now by spending the money on buying these savings.
Yes.
Is the price of those savings worth the cost of it?
Yep. And that's the question.
Yeah. That's what I want to see the numbers. And then if this says it's worth the cost today, then okay, then I'm in, let's do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Me
If
too.
it says it's not, then there's better uses for that money.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we're all set for tonight.
I can't believe I agree with him again. I can't stand it. It's happening a lot. I think I've been talking to you too much on my drives into work. Jim.
Yeah.
Well, it's logical, you have to agree.
You
with
can't,
it.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. That's where I've been coming from the day I walked through this door.
Yeah.
So before we go, if we have another, we need to have another meeting before the 16th.
Okay,
because I need to talk to you guys about the baseball field,
oh, okay,
and I need to talk to you about the parking lots.
all right.
Matt told me, I did call Matt, because you guys, remember we walked through Bakey and you were chit chatting about parking lots, and this is not my area, guys. This isn't my thing, is like parking lots, and I mean, I can build stuff, but I don't know the bigger systems. So I have an expert for it, but unfortunately, we don't have them right now. And thank you, Dan, for everything you've done. Really, you've worked super hard
Yes,
on
thank
this.
you.
Matt said that if he had to pick, he is fine with just patching up Bakey, but Memorial needs to be done. And he said it'd be around 75 grand. And he said the baseball field, did you get any kind of sense of that yet?
I'm still working on getting contractors.
Yeah, we gotta get contractors over there to look at the baseball field, but it needs to be leveled and graded because it's not, you saw, I sent you the report.
That's a matter of getting a bulldozer in there and taking away some dirt.
We're not talking about a ton of money.
Right,
But I think that I asked Dan if he could get an estimate, that'd be great. So I'm hoping to have those for the 16th, the
yeah, you've gotta
estimates.
bring the height of the playing field down to the abutting sides, right?
Yeah,
Well, I think the height of the field is fine. It's just that when you run the baselines, it drops off.
well, I think he's
So-
saying the same thing.
So you're
Like, it's-
talking about building up the sides or
Yeah,
lowering
So
the
I'm
field?
talking about building up the size, the running line.
How far out?
Well, within 3 feet of the running line, it drops by like 2 feet. So if you're running after a fly ball,
Yeah, I got that
It
part,
needs
but
to
how
come-
far, how wide do you
I
want?
would say we bring it out like 30 feet and gradually tape it off. That way, if someone's looking up, they're not dropping and jamming a knee.
Okay, yeah.
But
So you're talking about bringing in a lot of fill.
It's the field.
it is a lot of fill, and I think, I don't think we have to be extreme on that field to get it playable. I've got a transfer at home. I might set it up on the middle of that ballpark there and just shoot some heights
Yeah.
and see what our drop is out there just on my own.
Yeah.
And that would give us a good idea as far as, are we bringing in fill or are we cutting? So.
Why do you want the field up above? Is there any, what's the advantage to that?
My understanding was that it was cheaper to bring in the fill and level it out than it was to actually cut it.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah,
Because then you get into like
the
ripping out
outfield is
everything.
actually higher than the infield. And over the time, by them adding gravel and stuff, the outfield has actually come up
Yeah.
to the level of the outfield.
Oh, okay.
So what's happening now is now you have these drops along the baseline.
Yeah.
And I think to do it, I mean, we can do it where it meets all the standards of ballparks, and playing fields, or we can just bring some fill in, feather it off, redo the baselines. There's some other things.
Just make it safe.
Just to make it safe, because is it a primary field? No. Is it a field that we use for little leagues and we want it safe? Yeah, absolutely.
Right, but it doesn't have to be where they play all-star games and.
You got it. We have
Little League
fields here for
World Series.
that. We have fields here for that.
Right.
So, I think it's just a matter of getting it safe. And I don't think we need to bring in an engineering firm to say, hey, this is what you need to do.
No, you just
I think
to
we
add
need to
some
do is
level.
just bring in a company that knows how to construct fields without an engineering
Right.
Yeah,
plan and just say, okay, let's just build it up here, fill it in here, put
Yeah.
some new sod there.
make it safe.
Because we're not dealing with sprinklers out there. We're not dealing with any of that stuff.
Well, it's also not a professional baseball field, but I don't feel comfortable when I looked at it of kids fall. I mean, I agree that this is not new to me. This issue with this field has come up for 2 or 3 years, but it got literally shut down by COVID.
Yeah.
So we didn't deal with it last year because we knew that we didn't use it last year.
Right. As far as the Memorial School parking lot.
Yeah.
The thing that Matt said about that is the subsurface is poor.
Yes.
So you need to remove that surface.
Yeah.
And bring in something that's gonna pack solid is what I understood.
Yeah, Matt guesstimated between 75 to 100,000 to do it right.
Yeah, and I have,
Really,
I
really
have two
right
estimates on those.
Top to
right?
bottom. You do, what are
I have to look. I think
Okay,
one of
can you
them was
send those to us?
75,000 for for Memorial. And I think it was about 128 for Bacon.
Now, I drove both of those, and the only problem, and I agree with you on Memorial, it's,
Yeah,
it's Ripley, it's bumpy. Bakey, other than that central area right off the front of the building, that parking area, where it's got that torn up pavement, it seems fine.
Yeah, I would, and Matt agreed, Matt said that in the future, we can deal with Bakey if we fill that in.
Yeah,
And I think that one thing we could consider for that is to just fill it in and then do the spray coating like we did at the high school.
yeah,
Just,
Well, the teacher's parking lot over at Bacon, take a good look at the furthest one, because that is nothing.
Are you talking about,
All the other
if you're
ones,
facing the building, where is it?
All extreme right.
See?
way in the back.
I did, I drove all the way through there, all the way back to that.
If
tree.
you look at that blacktop, it's literally chunks this big that are still in place,
Okay,
but basically that whole parking lot is nothing but a pothole.
Oh, it's
Because
all chunks.
It's all chunks, so that would all have to come up, and they propose regrining that blacktop, putting it back down as a base, because it's a very good base, and then putting new.
boy, I didn't see any of that.
So,
Yeah, take a look at it.
Mr. Chair,
Hmm,
can I make a motion?
yeah,
Because I gotta get to another.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
no problem. We'll do this
Yeah.
next week.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the school board in this evening's meeting that we proceed with boilers, burners, and expansion tanks up for either Granite State or Palmer and Secord, based upon the breakout of the Granite State information, and hereby authorize the chair and the superintendent to proceed at a maximum dollar spend of 200,000 plus or minus 10%, something like that. I think that covers it because no pumps are in this.
yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, in
All
favor?
in favor?
All right.
And we'll discuss the pumps at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
we'll discuss it at the meeting.
We'll keep working on the pumps.
Yeah, and then get on the horn with them first thing in the morning, and
Yep.
see if we can type this up.
I gotta,
Yeah, thanks for coming,
can
Jim.
you take us out?
Yeah, meeting's adjourned.